Welcome back to a special edition of Concise Game Reviews. I'm your host, Relic Delta, and today, got something a little special lined up for you. I am doing this off the cuff, not doing it with the script, just doing this, I'm doing it by whatever comes into my head, so buckle up. Anyway, today we're going to be talking about the best of 2024 in terms of Steam top grossing revenue. Valve released this list at the end of, I think it was about mid-December. Point being, this is what Valve sees as their top grossing revenue products of 2024. So why do I find this interesting? I find it interesting because with a little bit of modeling and a little bit of math, we can sort of reverse engineer the list, right? We can plug some things in, work backwards, and we could try to figure out a little bit more information than what Valve is telling us in this list. So that's what I did. I went down through this list and I started to model it. And as they say with models, right? All models are wrong inherently, but a model can be useful. And that's really what we're going for here. So where do we start? We're going to start with just what this thing is first, right? Let's make sure that we ground everybody in what exactly Valve released when they released the top grossing revenue chart for Steam for 2024. So anyway, there is a description right on the page, which I'm basically going to read to you from. I'm not going to read the whole thing. I'm just going to kind of go through it, give you the basics of what's going on here. So what Valve did was they took their top grossing products. It looks like it's 100 products in this list, 100 games in this list. And they sorted them into 4 different categories. There's platinum, gold, silver, and bronze. What first place through 12th place is in platinum, 13th place through 24th place is in gold, 25th through 50th is in silver, and 51st through 100 is in bronze. So you can see as you move down the chart, you get a heck of a lot more, titles in each category. But this is kind of par for the course with games, as you move out of the top grossing revenue categories. You're gonna have more and more titles that fit into those buckets. Anyway, I think that we can use this information to learn a little bit about, number one, what is the value or the gross revenue spread of each category, and number two, I think we can use the information here to sort of gain a little bit more insight on some individual titles, try to glean how much they may have actually sold not only on Steam, but perhaps in the broader market, based on what information may be out there. So here's the methodology. Here's the methodology that I went down, and we'll get into the details here in just a bit. So in terms of trying to determine what each one of these buckets might be worth, and I want to be super clear here. I want to be ultra clear that none of this is going to be 100% correct. The entire point of doing all this is that you're building a model and you're working with inherently information that has gaps in it, right? So you're trying to fill in the gaps where it makes sense. And then once you start to fill in gaps that are perhaps more accurate than others, you can start to use that information to help you fill in more gaps. But nothing that I'm claiming here is infallible. It's all estimates. It's all modeling. And like I said before, we're just going to do the best we can with the information that's available. So what did I do? What was the model? How did I work backwards into some of these numbers in terms of trying to figure out what each revenue category is potentially valued at, or what is the spread in that revenue category? So here's what we did. I would take games on this list that had verified sales information, whether the publisher or the developer had released at least full or partial sales numbers, right? Now, you might be thinking to yourself, okay, well, but so oftentimes those sales numbers aren't fully on Steam. So here's how I kind of ranked the data that I could find. The absolute best data out there in terms of reverse engineering this list is verified sales information when it was Steam specific, right? There are a couple of games on this list, and possibly even one, I have to double check here, that released Steam-specific sales information. Palworld, for example, released Steam-specific sales information. So that actually becomes a relatively easy number to plug into the model and work backwards. Now, of course, you might be thinking, well, what about currency rates? What about sale price differences in different countries? I mean, again, all of that error is assumed in here, and that we should consider the fact that, again, these are estimates. They're not going to be exact, but what we're trying to do is we're trying to get into the ballpark on some of these things. So anyway, best information out there is verified sales information where it is specific to Steam. The second best information out there is where a company or publisher or developer released verified sales information for the game, period, right? They didn't reference a platform. They didn't reference specifically if it came from Steam or PC in general or Xbox or PlayStation. But what they said is that, look, we sold, we sold 1 million copies, or we sold, 5 million copies or 15 million copies, whatever it may be. And the third best information that I could find for modeling some of this backwards is secondary sources, right? Like you have Circana or any of the other third-party estimates of sales. Sometimes those were specific to a region, sometimes they were global. But the point is that there are estimates out there of what of how a game has performed in the market. And to be completely honest with you, the third-party estimators, they don't have 100% of the picture in all cases. They usually have a piece of it. So what you can usually glean from their information is that they're accurate up to a point, but they're always going to be missing something. So, when you're looking at estimates like Circana or some of the other ones out there, you generally have to look at those and understand that they're generally not seeing the whole picture. They might be seeing most of it. They might be seeing some of it, but they're never seeing the whole thing. And of course, the worst information, but still a point to reference, is modeling estimates. And when I say modeling estimates, I'm talking about some of the tools that are out there that will model a game's sales based on secondary sources like Steam reviews or wish lists, right? Because over enough time and enough information, you can train a system to predict what a game will sell based on tangential inbound information. It's not the exact number, and the model is definitely going to be wrong sometimes, but with enough information and over time, these models can be trained to be better. And so there's a few of those out there. I think steaminfo.db actually displays a couple of them, or actually up to 4 of them, and they're wildly different, right? So you can't take them at face value. You almost have to look at them and say, okay, do I take an average of these? Do I take the high? Do I take the low? Right? And you can plug different numbers into your model. So anyway, those are the 4 different ways that I searched for information in terms of data to start plugging into my model to kind of work backwards and determine some of the sales, at least maybe the Steam sales and the value buckets that we see here between platinum, gold, silver, and bronze. And so what I'm going to do next is I'm just going to give you some general comments, just some things that I either felt or learned looking at this data, or some realizations that I had. And then I'm going to give you some more specifics in the platinum, gold, silver, and bronze categories and kind of let you chew on those for a little bit. I pulled out some little nuggets of information in there that I thought were interesting, I think might make for good conversation, and we'll kind of go from there. All right, let's get into my general comments first. I just have a few of them here. I think the biggest thing that stood out to me was that Steam's biggest revenue winners are, it's really all over the place in terms of styles and genres that did end up selling well, at least in terms of the Steam PC market. I mean, we've got everything from, action adventure to survival to RPG to fighting to farming simulator. I mean, we've got a healthy mix of games here. So I don't buy into this notion that, gaming is imploding on itself, or we're only getting the same kinds of games here again and again and again. I think when you look at the top sellers for the year, I think the market is actually relatively healthy in terms of the genres that can find genres that can ultimately find a home, find a market of buyers to buy them. I mean, is the market healthy when it comes to saturation? No, absolutely not. The games market is just grossly saturated, and that doesn't change with this. But the idea that, the kind of the comical idea that we're only getting the same games, or the creativity is gone, or different genres are selling, is just, it's just totally bogus to me. So anyway, moving on. The platinum and gold categories in particular demonstrate that the most successful live service style games still cluster at the top in terms of revenue. But there is a healthy number of the more traditional, like single player and co-op style releases on this top sellers by gross revenue list as well. It's not just, again, there's this continued idea that it's all live service, and that, at least as far as Steam goes, that's not the case. Now, in terms of player number engagements, yeah, that might be a little bit different story. When you start getting into the raw numbers of how many people are literally playing something, yeah, okay, live service games are going to be a significant chunk of the buying market. But in terms of what actually sold really well in those platinum and gold categories, there's no reason, at least today, to worry that, the more traditional single player and co-op style releases aren't going to do well. And also on that note too, I'll take a lot of issue with the idea of what a live service game is, because today it's actually difficult to find a game that doesn't have some sort of content updatable live service component. Even games that don't build themselves as quote unquote live services almost always have some sort of live service component to them that they might not call that, but it's certainly being supported that way, whether it be yearly updates or quarterly updates, or we get content packs every several months, something along those lines. So when we think about the idea of live service, take a note that it's not like live service versus non-live service. This stuff is all a spectrum when you really get down to it. It just, in raw number counts in this chart, just in case you're curious, Microsoft/Xbox, they are the owner of 11 games on this chart, give or take one or two if I miscounted. They're kind of scattered from top to bottom, but I just think that was an interesting, I just think it was an interesting point to make, that out of the entire top selling revenue chart, Microsoft had 11 of them on the chart, whether that was through some of the studios they already had or through acquisitions. There shouldn't really be any mystery as to why Microsoft has been at the forefront of that broader platform strategy. We'll see what happens in their financials when they come up, but just on this chart alone, given this is the 2024 Steam chart, Microsoft is doing okay when it comes to games appearing on some of these top sales charts. All right, let's go and talk about the low end of the chart first. Let's go down to the bronze category, and let's talk about some of the numbers and some of the things that I believe I was able to reverse engineer from the bronze value bucket. And just as a reminder, the bronze ranking category is 51st place through 100. Now, reverse engineering what I was able to plug into the model, or what the model was able to help me reverse engineer, gives me an estimate of the bronze category being valued between the gross revenue values in the bronze category would fall somewhere between $15 million up to $50 million. Again, there's going to be some error there. There's going to be some range that I didn't get. But once I started to work backwards through known information, it looks like this value category ranges from $15 million to $50 million, give or take, whatever the error might be. So a couple interesting tidbits from the bronze category. Let's talk about a real wild card first. We have Dragon Age: The Veilguard did appear in this category. And I think this is kind of like a good news, bad news sort of thing. Both things can be true at the same time, right? Given that Dragon Age: The Veilguard is in this category, there's definitely a lower cap on its Steam sales. So that doesn't obviously tell us everything about the game in terms of like how it sold across the whole market. But it is a signal, and it is an indication that its success on Steam is limited. It has a cap. And thus, I extrapolate out from that its success on other platforms is probably somewhat similar, using kind of the general rule that a sample is generally representative of the population. So the Dragon Age Veilguard, given that it is in the bronze category, it's a good news, bad news story. It's good that it's on here. It's probably not great news, especially for a game that has been in development for as long as it has been. It's probably not great news that it capped out on Steam in the bronze category. So, and the numbers that you get from that, I mean, you're talking maybe 1 million sales on Steam using some basic napkin math. It's not the worst news in the world for Dragon Age: The Veilguard, but it's also not the best news, considering this essentially tells us there's a cap to it. And if you want, dig into Concise Game Reviews. I actually reviewed Dragon Age: The Veilguard prior to this episode, and you can hear my thoughts on the game there. Anyway, moving on. Let's talk about a Sony title real quick. Just as a note, Horizon Forbidden West Complete Edition was on the Steam chart, was on the Steam bestsellers chart somewhere. I apologize, I have to pull it up here. But you know what wasn't? You know what was not at all on the Steam bestsellers sales chart was the Horizon Zero Dawn remaster. It's not on here. It didn't even make the bronze bucket. And given some of the associated information and data points out there associated with that title, I think we can come to the conclusion that the Horizon Zero Dawn remaster, in terms of PC, specifically Steam and PC, didn't do all that well. The concurrent player numbers, while I always caution people to never use concurrent player numbers to confuse that as player base, they do give us a little bit of evidence that the game didn't see any popularity out the gate. Clearly, given that it's not in the bronze category, I think we can say that the Horizon Zero Dawn remaster did not do so well on Steam. So what did do well in this category that helped drive us towards, at least my estimate, that this value bucket is somewhere, ranges between $15 million and $50 million? Well, you've got Persona 3 Reloaded, Farming Simulator, Silent Hill 2 Remake, Content Warning, Balatro. Those titles help drive me to the value range that, again, I think bronze is somewhere in the $15 million to $50 million gross revenue value. And to be clear, it means the games in that category are somewhere between those numbers. It doesn't mean every game in that category was exactly $50 million or $45 million or $30 million. It means the games in the bronze category fall somewhere within that range of values. All right, let's move on to silver. Silver is obviously going to be more value than the bronze category. The range is going to include a minimum range that's higher than bronze, but obviously a lower maximum value that's lower than gold. And so again, when I plugged everything into the model based on some of the rules and sales data that I stated earlier, my estimate of the silver category means that the gross revenue of the games in this category are going to range somewhere between $50 million to $100 million. And I'll quickly list off some of the games that helped me get to that estimate. Gray Zone Warfare, Tekken 8, Manor Lords, Last Epoch, Stalker 2, Ghost of Tsushima PC version, and Dragon's Dogma 2. Those were the titles that I primarily used to reverse engineer this value range or bucket, whatever you want to call it. Okay, moving on to gold. Again, using the model, working backwards. I conclude that the gold category probably is somewhere around $100 million to $199 million. Call it 200, right? Whatever. Give or take a bunch of millions here, right? I mean, especially as you go up into the gold and platinum categories. I mean, we start talking about possible error ranges of multiple millions of dollars because of the natural, we'll call it, range of the value of some of these games. Because this is where you start and get into some of your heavier live service titles that some of these are just absolute juggernauts, right? So, but in the gold category, here are the games that I use to help reverse engineer this based on data that's out there. Enshrouded, Dragon Ball Sparking Zero, Path of Exile 2 Early Access Edition. And something I want to say about Path of Exile 2 Early Access Edition was that the only way that it ends up in the gold category is if they sold the more expensive packs for early access, not the $30 pack. Because given the numbers that they released, they would have had to have sold the more expensive packs in significant number to get up into what I believe the value range is of the gold category. So keep that in mind. So anyway, the point is the Path of Exile 2 early access folks were selling a lot of the more expensive packs, not just the $30 pack. And then finally, Cyberpunk 2077, using some data from the expansion and numbers that they've released, comfortably is sitting here in the gold category. Obviously, still making significant revenue for CD Projekt Red. And then last, but certainly not least, the platinum category. Again, this is where we're starting to talk about the biggest numbers, the biggest room for swings in terms of data and revenue. But up in this category, by the model, working backwards through the model, I believe that this category is games that had gross revenue of $200 million and higher. So whatever that cap is, right? Maybe that cap is somewhere around $450, $500 million. Not exactly sure, but this is basically $200 million and up. And again, remember, Steam or Valve only put 12 games in this category. They are the 12 most grossing games on the Steam platform. And how did I arrive at this? How did I determine that I believe at least that this category is at least at a minimum $200 million and up? Space Marine 2 helped me get there. Palworld, which actually was one of the best in terms of identifiable information to use, and Helldivers 2, right? Using those three titles and a couple other pieces of information that I found out there, incomplete information on some other games, I'm estimating that this category is going to be about $200 million in revenue and up. So there you have it, folks. That is my broader takeaway from the Steam top grossing revenue winners of 2024. I'm not saying this information is 100% correct. In fact, I know that it's not. But again, it's a model. It helps give us a view of what kind of numbers this industry is doing. It helps us understand what games are selling similar, at least in terms of revenue, to other titles. That can also help us pinpoint perhaps some things that are, not selling as well as we might want to see them selling, or at least the companies want to see them selling. I mean, I'm sure we could make 150 videos off of Horizon Zero Dawn Remaster and Dragon Age the Veilguard, right? And some of the challenges and tribulations that those games have gone through. But anyway, don't have time for that here today. I hope you enjoyed this. If you did, please either let me know in the comments or on my Twitter page. If you didn't, well, I'm sorry. I bored you for about 24 minutes. Anyway, we'll talk to you next time. This is Relicar Delta signing out.